Shabbat Shalom. As some of you know, I just returned here to Israel from Israel this week. I was in Israel on a solidarity mission organized by and for the conservative or Masorti leaders. We were a group of 30 rabbis and lay leaders from around the world. We were from the United States, Canada, Europe, South America, and Israel. Our mission going to Israel was to bear witness to what has and what is happening in the Holy Land, to support our brothers and sisters in these difficult days, and to bring their stories back to share with you. I will admit that this was the first time I traveled to Israel when I was a bit nervous. I was a bit nervous, not actually because of the rockets, and not because of the war, and not because of the terrorists. In fact, honestly, when I was there, I felt completely safe, and I wouldn't hesitate to go back to Israel in a minute. I was nervous, though, about schlepping through the airport these huge bags of donations that I brought with me. I think Bethel alone bought out all of the long underwear from Costco. That was a 56-pound bag, and in addition, I schlepped 4 bulletproof vests that were 22 pounds each. That's another story. Thank you all for your donations. In addition to the long underwear and the cards that I gave to soldiers, we are sending thousands of dollars to the Masorti movement, the conservative movement. There still is an opportunity to make a financial contribution to Masorti, and I invite you to speak with me for more information. In the 56 hours that I was in Israel, I have a year's worth of story and thoughts and impressions to share. The stories we heard firsthand and the sights that we saw are seared into my memory. They're stories of the brutally murdered and those who miraculously survived, stories of hostages and stories we heard from their worried parents, stories by soldiers and by policemen and by politicians and more. But it's the words of Edith, a 50-year-old woman, mother and teacher, that come to mind this morning. Edith Green is from Stenitzan, a town near the Gaza Strip, and she was there when the attack began. Somehow she managed to survive at home, and she was rescued 12 hours later. Today she's living with her family down by Eilat. And what was true of Edith, I believe, is true of the nation as a whole. You've heard of PTSD, she said. Well, we suffer from TSD. We are not yet P, we're not yet post. We're still in the midst of this trauma. The immediate danger is over, and Israel has regained a certain stability. Evacuees now have food, housing, and clothes. The border with Gaza is secure in a sense. People are resolved to the fact that there's war in the south and a looming threat in the north. Most of the dead have been identified and buried. Many of the surgeries have taken place and the physical rehab is underway. One thing, though, Israelis are not getting used to is 241 hostages in Gaza. Nor should they. We were in Israel during Shloshim, the 30-day period that traditionally marks the end of a period of mourning. And there were moving ceremonies, a moment of silence, 1,400 candles lit at the Kotel, 1,400 names and pictures on TV for hour after hour, one by one. But when it comes to recovering, the end is nowhere in sight. That's why it's TSD, not PTSD. Edith explained this disorientation that people are feeling this way. In the first few days after the attack, she said, I was in a state of total shock. I couldn't eat or sleep or hardly even speak. After about a week, my husband gave me some good advice. He said, just think ahead to the next hour. What do you need to do in the next hour? That was helpful. And when I got that down, I tried for 2 hours. What do I need to do for the next 2 hours? Then half day, and on and on. Today, Idit is asking herself, what about tomorrow? What do I need to do tomorrow? And that's what Israelis are asking. What of tomorrow? From hard-wrought experiences, Israelis know how to respond to emergencies. Admittedly, in this case, they were unprepared. It took more than just a few hours to get many basic needs met, and that was a source of tremendous frustration. But today, they know what to do, at least for the next hour. One thing Israelis do, of course, is feed people. Thus, the meme that's going around, Israeli soldiers are asking Ashkenazi families to stop sending them food. The situation is difficult enough, they said. There are, of course, other ways that people are showing support. When a call goes out that a lone soldier is being buried on Har Herzl, and the family is worried that they won't have a minyan, Israelis show up. They show up by the thousands, even though they've never met the person. When a farmer from the south arrives at a street corner in Tel Aviv, within minutes, people come to buy all of the produce, not because they actually need the food, but to support the farmer. Where there is an immediate need, Israelis show up. And the same is true in our American Jewish community. That's why Costco was bought out of long underwear in minutes. And it's why when my colleagues and I received an invitation to come to Israel, no one hesitated. When Israel was hurting, we dropped everything because that's where we needed to be. What do we need to do in the next hour? We've got that. What do we need to do after that? We're working on that. When it comes to Israel, today, kind of have figured out. Tomorrow is a work in progress. That was a theme that we heard over and over again. October 7th, we were told, was a turning point. And today, Israel is a different country. Events from that day will reshape national and international politics, the military, economics, and Israeli society itself. But how? Where is Israel going? What does the future hold? No one, of course, knows for sure. And with the war going on and with hostages in captivity, some can only focus, understandably, just on the here and now. But others are beginning to look ahead and to plan for the future. At the Misrad HaChutz, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we met with Ambassador Emmanuel Nachshon, who with some measure of excitement described changes that are already taking place. Women soldiers, he said, were just as brave as men. They died like men. They saved people like men. They were taken captive like men. The debate about women in combat, he therefore said, that debate is over. A gay couple was engaged to be married when one of them was killed, sadly, just before the wedding. The other was given full spousal rights of mourning by the Rabbanut, by the army. Discrimination against same-sex couples, he said, is over. Bedouin were killed in the attack like Jews, taken hostage like Jews, and saved Israeli Jews. And yet some of their towns are not protected by Iron Dome like Jewish towns. The status of second-class citizens, Nachshon said, is over. When we met with President Herzog, he asked us about rising anti-Semitism around the world. And just that day, he had issued a letter to presidents of American universities expressing concern about this rise in anti-Semitism. Herzog understands that Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lezeh is not just a slogan that all Jews are responsible for each other. He emphasized that our fates are literally bound together. And so, October 7th, he said, should mark the beginning of a new Jewish diaspora relationship, Israel diaspora relationship. Now, no one is so naive to think that these and other issues will be solved at the snap of a finger, that there'll be no controversy. We're Jews, we argue, but everyone seems to agree that this moment presents a window of opportunity to redefine fundamental values and rethink priorities. We are at the beginning of what author David Chazoni is calling the Great Jewish Rethinking. Sally, you have an article in his new book. He says, in this great Jewish rethinking, old assumptions are being challenged and creative new possibilities are being explored. There's no going back to the normal, because as Nachshon pointed out, before October 7th, it was anything but normal. There was talk of civil war. I happened to be sitting next to the ambassador and leaned over to him at that point and said, so what you're saying is that we need to have a reboot of Startup Nation. No one knows for sure what the future holds, but with an indomitable spirit, Idit and Israelis are beginning to think of and dream of tomorrow. I think that optimism is part of our Jewish DNA that can be traced all the way back to Avraham Avinu, to our very Parsha. You know I had to get to Torah at some point, right? When Noah faced the destruction of the world, his response when the waters began to recede was to descend into a drunken stupor. By contrast, consider Abraham. One son was nearly killed, the other banished. His beloved wife had just died and his concubine was exiled. Abraham was all alone. He might have grieved for the rest of his days. Instead, we read, Vayakom Avraham me'al meto. He arose from before his dead. He arose, he stood up, because literally mourners would sit on the ground, much like those who sit shiva, sit on low stools. But this is more than a literal description. A Hasidic commentary explains it this way. Usually a person facing tsuris, experiencing a tragedy, is broken in body and spirit. They stumble carrying a tremendous weight of despair. But Avraham rose up. He got up and he stood up, fully erect, to face the future. To do so, he addressed two primary concerns. First, he secured ties to the land by buying a burial plot for Sarah. Next, he set plans in motion for the Jewish future and for Jewish grandchildren by finding a wife for Isaac. Abraham bestowed and taught this ability to begin again to his descendants. As a people, we Jews have suffered tragedies that might have devastated other nations, but we know how to transform sorrow into tears. The destruction of the Second Temple, it led to a complete reimagining of Jewish life, the development of synagogues and prayer and study and more. The Inquisition of the Middle Ages sparked Jewish mysticism. Pogroms led to Zionism. And consider this. In 1947, the highest birth rate anywhere in the world was where? In DP camps. Now, you might have thought to yourself, who in the world would want to bring life into the world after what they experienced? Who would have the power to restart their lives? We do. Am Yisrael does. And 3 years after the Shoah, the state of Israel was born. As a people, we mourn and weep, and then Vayakom, we rise up to build, create a bright future. This is our unique strength. And it's not for Israel alone. The diaspora needs rebooting no less. And it's not for either of us to do on our own. B'yachad, we are in this together. Chaverim, our Jewish world is changing in ways that are both exciting and admittedly frightening. We will determine in large measure the way in which it goes. Inspired by Abraham and by Idit and by Israelis, we must rise up to face the challenges, those of today, this next hour, and those of tomorrow. And so we pray, Tzur Yisrael, Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael. Rock of Israel, arise to our aid. Grant us strength and wisdom to respond to the needs of this hour and to look beyond this moment, to envision and work toward a vibrant Jewish future full of the blessings of life and of peace. And Amar, Amen. And to you. I invite you to join me after Shabbat lunch around 12:30 in the Learning Center, where I'll share additional stories of my experiences.
Shalom bimrama, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'aleko Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Yase shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael.